Hello and welcome to the show again. I've got the guest with me today who I'm delighted to speak to. He is the producer and director of his own company called Real Time Pictures, and he's done an awful lot connected with Doctor Who. So I'd like to welcome him now, please. Keith Barnfather, how are you, Keith?
I'm all right, mate. As we speak, it's getting towards Christmas, so I've just been to the post office with about 150 orders and had about 200 people in the queue. But luckily, I used the machine, not the go in the queue, so not so bad.
Lovely. Yeah. So Keith, right, first question for you. Um, when you were a wee lad, uh, what were your aspirations to be when you grew up?
Um, I don't I was one of those people I think who never really knew what they wanted to do when they were growing up. I went through primary and secondary education without really having a firm idea. If I'd have passed all my A levels, I would have become a town and country planner. That was what I'd actually applied to university for. But I'm a great believer in everything happens for a reason. My whole life has seemed to rotate around finding where the positives came out of anything that's happened, even the bad things. And what that led me to do was, because I'd always been a Doctor Who fan, science fiction fan, avid reader, of everything for many years. When I heard of the Doctor Appreciation Society being formed, I was involved in setting it up with Jan Vincent-Rutsky, Stephen Payne, Gordon Blows, Jeremy Bentham. We were sort of the main four, I think, that really started it off. Five that started it off. I just had in my mind that working for the business that you love, working say in television when you loved Doctor Who and science fiction was perhaps a bad thing. Yeah. You shouldn't really do that. So when Jan went to work for the BBC, I sort of thought, no, not really me. And when I didn't pass my A levels, I sort of went to work for an engineering company in London in their clerical office for a while. And they used to visit Jan at the BBC and things like this. And then finally, I sort of thought, well, there's no point me denying what I really want to at least be connected with, which is TV. So I got a job, managed to get a job at the BBC, went into engineering, worked in their videotape department, technically worked on Doctor Who for a couple of years, getting out tapes and edit masters and editing tapes for programs and stuff. Spent a sort of halcyon period being able to watch it being made, things like this. But eventually I was career oriented. So I was offered a job at Channel 4 when that began in 1982, and I couldn't resist that opportunity. You know, even though I love Doctor Who and I wanted to carry on being able to visit the sets and stuff, I just thought, no, this is my career, not just a passion. So I went to Channel 4 and learned a lot there. Started in VT there, then went up to business development, which is where I really learned about the sort of marketing and sales and cost side of making television. And eventually left Channel 4 and formed Real Time in 1984.
Gosh,
Yeah. Don't know where
time
they
flies,
went.
doesn't it? It really
Yeah,
does.
I swear to God, I've no idea where they went.
And you've done an awful lot in that time too. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, not only Doctor Who related and science fiction related, but obviously I've earned my living from corporate and business television and a bit of broadcast during that entire time. And I'm obviously proud of that, I've managed to keep television is a very fickle business, and to run a business in this for 40 years and be able to live is quite an achievement.
I think so. God, yeah. Especially when the COVID thing hit too. That must have been. I don't. How
Well,
did you ride the wave on that one? Was that
yeah,
difficult?
well, we by that point, I mean, we are and were established enough that we didn't have to worry. We were very lucky. We could have just stood still for the year. It wouldn't have been a problem. But as it was, I had probably about 8 or 10 productions in the can in advance of, not intentionally, they were just there. So I actually spent most of lockdown making edits, finishing things that I hadn't got. And we, during lockdown, we carried on putting things out because there was a history. And of course, you could still, we could still get tape stock. God, that shows you. DVD stock and things like that. And we've had uploads and streaming going for 4 or 5 years. So ultimately, we were incredibly lucky that it didn't affect the business that much. I mean, obviously, on a personal level, it did. I was actually in Cyprus with my wife and my son during lockdown. We chose to be there. We were lucky enough that we had that choice to be there. We were already based there half the time anyway, and Harry was going to school there. So we just decided that we would stay there rather than Britain. And I think in the long run, that was probably a good decision for us. There was just a bit more of an ability to have a bit more freedom in Cyprus than Britain.
Yeah, yes, that's nice. It's nice that you had that other outlet, which is really, really good, you know. So getting on to working, setting up your company real time, was it always the intention that you would aim for doing some kind of Doctor Who science fiction content from the offset? And how
Um,
you think, oh my God, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, yeah. No, it was always a mixed bag because I knew even then, again, training at Channel 4, that there wasn't going to be enough money coming in from doing Doctor Who related or science fiction related programming, unless you were working in broadcast television, which I had chosen not to do. Although if that had come, I wouldn't have argued, but it wasn't what I was initially looking at doing. So I was intent on making a living from business and corporate, which is where I was aiming my main sales and marketing at. But pardon me. But as a sideline, I've always called it a sideline. The Doctor Who and science fiction spin-off material was an important priority for me because it was my passion as well as, I mean, I've always enjoyed everything I've ever done for any client, as also for my own stuff. But obviously, when you're making production, coming up with the idea, producing it, directing it most of the time, editing it a lot of the time, and then seeing it finished and on the shelves as a DVD or a VHS at first, there's a great deal of satisfaction in that. It's a very rewarding life to have. And I planned right from the start to do Mythmakers. That was one of my primary goals, was to start making Mythmakers. At that time, the BBC weren't producing VAM, as they call it, value-added material or special features on their VHSs. We started that before the BBC did. So when we released the first two Mythmakers at the end of 1984, Michael Wisher and John Leeson, it was completely new. It was radical. It was different. And we were lucky that we hit the right moment, the right time, and really have never looked back. I mean, I think now I'm in post on Mythmakers 178. So that would probably mean it's been relatively successful.
I think so, yeah, Keith. Yeah. Looking back on that now, because it's fascinating to me, and I'm sure you must have had a moment where you sat down and thought, "Blimey, some of those people I spoke to on those interviews are not here anymore."
Hmm.
And many of them are from the very early days of production and so on. And maybe sometimes it may have been the only interview they ever recorded. So do you think about it now and look back at it and think,
Well,
wow,
I
that's historical now. That's kind of like, that's an historical document there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've said it before, and I'm happy to say it again. I didn't think too much about that when we started, but it wasn't long before I did, because sadly, after we'd interviewed Ian Marter for his Mythmakers, within, I think, something like a month, he'd passed away. And he'd just signed the VHS labels, because we used to do signed limited edition VHSs when we started. He'd just signed them all and given me all his photographs to insert into the edit. And I got a phone call say that he'd passed away. And that was just it was a shock in many ways. One, because, I really got to know him. I met him over the years at a couple of DWAS conventions before, but there's no better way to actually get to know somebody than on the shoot, when you're actually spending work time with them. But it's always a mixture of fun and work when you're working in this business. So, we really, David Howe, the director, and I, and the crew, we really all got to know him, and Nick got to know him during the day that we were filming. And he was such a terribly nice person. And when he died, when I heard, I just my two first reactions were shock that he'd passed away because he was so young. But secondly was the thought, oh God, thank God we did the interview, because at least that's there for the future. That interview is the only interview true really with Ian that exists in any depth whatsoever. There's some nice convention material which I filmed actually as well, but for the most part it's the only proper interview talking about his life. And from that moment onwards I was aware, that what we were doing was important and historic. We have kept every inch of every piece of material that we've shot, every rush estate we've kept, as well as the edit masters. So there's it is probably the most extensive history of any television program ever. Yeah.
It's absolutely extraordinary when you think about it, that the alumni you had, over the years, really amazing.
Yeah.
And long may it continue, Keith.
Well, I mean, I can't carry on forever, but hopefully there will be a next generation. We shall wait and see.
Well, I hope all those things that you have archived will be protected.
Oh yes, don't worry.
Yeah.
That's already been put in motion. I mean, one of the reasons why lately I've been working on with those people who are interested in doing it, archiving productions that perhaps one or two people just did one or two and then forgot them in a way. Right now, we've just released Reverse the Polarity, which is a compilation of the Archangel videos that were made in the 90s by Liam Rudden and George Cairns. And George had the Pneumatics and the Digital S tapes up in his loft, and just sort of not forgotten them, but would probably never have thought to do anything with them. And when I gave them to David Palfreyman, who does archiving, does capturing of old tapes, he's got a massive selection of machines, and he does it for the BBC as well. He said, give it another 6 or 8 months, maybe a year, and those tapes would have been unplayable. So we've managed to salvage and archive programming, which George and Liam have agreed happily that we keep the masters that we've now created in the real-time archive, so that they know that they're saved for posterity. And I'm happy to do that with any reasonably good quality production that's been made that isn't obviously breaking copyright. That's not my game.
Speaking of copyright, when you need to get rights for certain characters or concepts from an established series, so let's say we're talking about Doctor Who, because you have done an awful lot of Doctor Who related spin-off productions and so on.
Yeah.
And the first one was, I think the first one, I'm right in saying, Keith, was Wartime that you did.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Now, how difficult is it to obtain rights to an established character? Was it a difficult process to start with, or was it fairly easy?
Well, it depends. It simply depends on the circumstances and on your ability and your knowledge in what you're doing. I mean, in the case of Wartime, and the sands shift, because when we did Wartime, I'd spoken to the BBC directly and said, now, would you agree that Derek Sherwin owns the rights to Unit and Benton? And they wrote back, and as all lawyers do, they don't say yes, they say we have no objection. which is the right thing to do, because you never want to admit something, because that is a legal precedent. But I got a letter back from them saying, yes, we have no problem, but you obviously have to go to Derek Sherwin about this. So after I'd got that communication from them, I went to Derek and I said, well, would you license us to do this? Which he happily did, bless him. And then I obviously spoke to John Levine and asked him, would he do it? A big thing for him, a huge step for him, because he loved Benton, still does. It means a lot to him, the character. And it was taking a big chance on a young, inexperienced production team with no real budget, which he knew. And he said yes, bless him, which I'll be eternally grateful for the rest of my life. And funnily enough, I watch, I'll watch Wartime Today. I don't do that very often, but obviously you tend to see these things every once in a while. And I'm still very proud of Wartime. I think it actually stands up incredibly well. And when the new novelization of Wartime came out, I think last year from Telos, I was over the moon, because that's been expanded and fitted in with the real-time universe. We've got the Whoniverse now, where now we can have the real-time universe, so that all of our dramas now fit together. They are narrative driven. And now in the latest episode of Doctor Who, Kate Lethbridge-Stewart has said she fought Yetis. That now means that Downtime is included as canon within Doctor Who, which also means every production we've ever made is canon within Doctor Who. So that's all rather nice, isn't it?
You made it, Keith.
I'm so pleased.
You are official.
Technically, I've now made Doctor Who.
You're there. You're joining the ranks of Big Finish now. They're canon now, and everything. And,
well, of course, they're officially licensed by the BBC.
I know, but I mean, they never kind of like drifted much into the actual TV series. The thing.
Well, they're not.
I mean, they obviously rattled off some of the.
They also have legal responsibilities within their agreement within the BBC, which I don't know about, and why should I? But they obviously have a specific set of criteria of the things that they can do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree. Yeah. Now, just to backtrack, we're going slightly just backtrack briefly.
Yeah, sure.
And I always like asking this question because it's an interesting insight into who I'm talking to. But what was your first memory of Doctor Who? Is it like just a kind of flashes of imagery, or do you remember a particular episode?
I think it depends on your age. I mean, I was a little bit younger than Jan and Steve and the others, and Jeremy. So I don't remember story in the early days. The very first ones are flashes, and then once we get near the end of Heart and the beginning of Trout, and I could remember the entire episodes. So my first flashback memory has always been the Menoptera flying through the air in that story. There was something visually about that caught my attention when I was obviously very young. But then slowly, as you get to near the end of Hartnell, I remembered more and more, and I certainly remember the regeneration scene, and then Trout, and I pretty much remember them all. Although your memory as you mature does tend to go a bit,
This is an interesting one. You did some ambitious video productions, Doctor Who productions.
If you say so.
Well, one would be, I think, Downtime.
Yeah.
Due to the amount of people you had coming back, the original character, there was a big cast of well-known people from the world of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
How difficult was that to juggle that, to get that going?
Well, the difficulty of any kind of production is getting the money. And Downtime had been postponed a couple of times because I simply couldn't fund it myself. I just didn't have enough money to make it, looking at the budget. And it wasn't until Domini Temporal Services, Andrew Beach's organization, who were looking for something to put to show at their convention because there was no Doctor Who on TV. And Ian Levine got involved, and basically the three of us co-funded it. made it possible to afford to make it. I mean, it was and is and probably always will be the most expensive Doctor Who spin-off that wasn't a officially licensed, i.e. like Sarah Jane Adventures or Torchwood or K9 and Company were all BBC made or BBC sponsored, whereas this was an independent production. And the BBC at this time, going back to 96, 97, 95, before the film was muted by the BBC, their attitude was very much, if you're doing anything that can help keep us getting money in for Doctor Who, we don't mind, as long as you're doing it with our nod, with an official nod. So we were given permission to use the characters that are copyright to the BBC. We used the BBC visual effects department. We used the BBC costume department. So we were bringing money into the BBC as an organization when we made it, but we were also promoting the program. I mean, at that point, before the film came along, Downtime would have been the highest profile production that had been made, and it was about as close to Doctor Who as you could possibly get. I mean, Kevin Davis and Mark Ayres had made Shakedown, which was brilliant. I think they did a fantastic job with it. I love it. But Downtime was very much intended to be as close to Doctor Who as possible. And as you say, we had Nick Courtney playing the Brigadier. We had Elizabeth Sladen playing Sarah Jane. We had Deborah Watling playing Victoria Waterfield. We had her father playing Professor Travis. We had John Leeson playing another role. I mean, the list just went on and on. And of course, we created two characters, Captain Cavendish and Kate Lethbridge-Stewart, who, has gone on to become a regular featured member of the Doctor Who program.
It's extraordinary. You created, like a bit of history there.
Mm.
And
I think
yeah.
just finishing it. I think if you look at both Downtime and the 1996 movie, Paul McGann movie, and you look at them both, you could see with each of them the progression from, shall we say, classic Who to new Who. They both of them have elements of both. I mean, in no way claiming any great contribution to that, because that was all Russell, so nothing to do with real time. But you can see that both of them led along, just like the Virgin New Adventures, I think, led towards where Russell was going. So it's a lovely bridge, I think, that exists between the two.
Yeah, I think so too. I like that. With it bringing in a modern kind of angle.
Yeah, there's something in them. They just look different. They feel different.
Yeah. You also later, and this I'm jumping a bit here because you, as I say, you have done an awful lot of productions, but you brought back a much loved character from 80s Doctor Who, who called Syl.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Played wonderfully by Nabil Shaban, of course.
The one and only, yeah.
Yeah. So where did the idea come from to want to bring him back, and get him back?
Well, most of these things come from encounters a lot of the time. Not always true, but a lot of the time. And we've been doing a series of compilation myth makers called The Doctors on DVD, which is sort of like for me, it's like a part work of my life, because it's, each one is each Doctor and then each Doctor's production team. So, it is the history of Doctor Who in a set of 24 DVDs. But when we were going through them, it was obvious we didn't have some interviews we needed to fill up the 6 on each, because there are 6 myth makers on each Doctor's DVD. So I was looking to interview some people to fill up DVDs, and one of them was obviously Nabil, to fill up the the Monsters DVD we did. So not only did we do his Mythmakers, but we then used that Mythmakers in the compilation. So that led me to contact Nabil. And I went out to his home in the country, spent an idyllic couple of days there with him and Marcella, his wife. And it really was. It was lovely. It was very, very enjoyable and a great time. We got on so well. We just chatting and doing the filming. And at the end of it, I was sort of thinking, oh, I'd really love to work with Nabil. You know, maybe I can find a role for him in one of our productions. And my mind just went, oh, yeah, of course, Sil, you know. Oh, hang on. Sil isn't copyright to the BBC. Sil is copyright to Philip Martin, who wrote the script. Now, there's a possibility. So I actually asked Nabil when I was with him doing his Mythmakers, you know, if I could find, because he kept saying he would have loved to reprise the role, but the BBC don't look like they're ever going to use him, which I think is a tragedy. And I just sort of kept thinking, well, could we do something? Could we manage it? So I said, well, look, leave it with me. And when I got home, I contacted Philip and had a long chat with him. And he was over the moon. He said, yeah, you know, and I sent him downtime and a couple of other things so he could see the level that we could achieve. And he wrote me a draft script for Sil, which included the Doctor, or an outline, not a script, no, an outline. And I went back to him and I said, well, this is very good, but you missed the point. This is not Doctor Who. This is about Sil. And I need you to write a drama where Sil is the central character. And Philip came back and said, oh, wow. Oh, my God. I can actually write something just about Nabil, about Sil. So he had to turn it all upside down. And we talked a lot along the way about what we could do that could make it work with no money, blah, blah, blah. And eventually he delivered the script that we filmed, which I'm very, very proud of.
There was a lot of fun on set, I imagine,
Always.
making it.
Always.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
one who believes, I mean, I've never done a shoot where I had the time and the money to sit around and enjoy the moment. It's always been pressurized, but not professional, fast, but not to the point where you lose control, you know. And all the people who've ever worked with me, especially the crew that did Sil, were completely committed to making it happen. The actors, all of the production staff. And it was a joy to shoot because I was so supported by everybody. You know, I never felt for 1 minute that no one would not pull that extra bit just to make it happen. And it was a wonderful atmosphere while we were filming it. It was a great week. Basically, it was just over a week. It's about, I think it was 5 days. Yeah, it was 5 days in the studio. 5 days to do a 4-part, 25-minute series is ludicrous. You know, single camera shooting as well, not multi-camera, you know, crazy. But it was good.
Really fast, yeah. So you had to have everything really worked out to the letter, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
It was all very, again, you see, it comes down to experience and planning. If I had one fantasy, shall we say, that I would still like to do, it would be to direct a Doctor Who where they don't think they've got time to do enough to get it right. To me, it would be an absolute luxury to have the time and the ability to choose and make my shots and not have to rush. You know, because for me, it would not be rushing. I know every director out there who's ever worked on Doctor Who would laugh at me saying that, but he's never worked on the pace that I've had to over the years, you know. And also producing and directing, you know, that's never easy. It's a very difficult job to do both. But everybody that I had there, including all of the team working on the productions, you know, floor managing, everything to help me, were incredible. It was wonderful.
That's great. That is really good because it's very difficult, you know, to do a production when you are, you know, you're up against time. You know, time is a factor, money or lack thereof, and everyone's kind of like, everyone's aiming for the same sort of result, but the pressure must be quite intense sometimes.
It's also, especially when you're doing a monster costume drama where you're having makeup and prosthetics and having to try and keep that looking right. that was a real struggle, for everybody involved. And for some of the people who were doing it, it was a first time of actually having to do it in anger and being on set doing it. And it was a huge learning curve. I mean, thank God we had a wonderful makeup artist who knew exactly what she was doing, and was able to work around the problems and make it go through. But everybody produced, everybody delivered. Again, I've got nothing but praise for everybody that worked on it.
So, Keith, what are you working on? Are you allowed to say what you're currently working on?
Well, I mean, right now we've just, as I've already mentioned, we've just released Reverse the Polarity. We've also just released Who is Tom Baker, which was a VHS release in the 1990s that got, basically the company went bankrupt early in 2000s, and the program to a degree was lost. I mean, there are VHSs out there, but as far as I am aware, all the edit masters were destroyed. So we've done a salvage job on that, and I'm incredibly impressed with what we've achieved, and that's just gone out as well. In about 2 weeks, we're releasing 2 documentaries about the BBC books and the Virgin books adventures during the wilderness years that weren't. And those will both be coming out probably just between Christmas and New Year. Next year, we've got new myth makers coming out. Well, two that I'm really looking forward to releasing because they are incredible is Sophie Aldred interviewing Sylvester McCoy, and Sylvester McCoy interviewing Sophie Aldred about their careers since we did the last myth makers. And those will all be out in the spring. So always busy, and another drama on the cards, but I can't be sure when.
Right. Yeah. Busy man. You are, yeah.
Yeah. I keep trying to slow down, but probably won't do it until I
It's
drop
not
dead.
working.
Yeah.
It's going the opposite, I think. Yeah, probably doing more, you
Yeah,
know.
I'm taking a break for a couple of months in the new year though, because I need it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Um, Keith, thank you so much for joining me. I really
Yeah,
appreciate your time
pleasure.
for this.
Pleasure.
It's been fascinating learning about the trials and tribulations of independent filmmaking, really, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
it's always been interesting. I can promise you that.
it certainly, yeah. I'm sure there's more stories you could tell me at a later date, you know. Um, But thanks a lot again, Keith, and we'll be back very soon for another interview. So thank you guys for watching, and take care until next time. Bye bye.
Bye.